The 7 most ruthless rulers to ever hold power. Let's start with the rulers who were merely completely unhinged, and work our way towards the ones who make every other tyrant on this list look like a hall monitor. Number 7. Caligula, 37 AD. Before we talk about what Caligula did, let's talk about what Rome expected of him. When Caligula took power in 37 AD, the Roman people were ecstatic. His father was a beloved general. His family was legendary. The streets of Rome filled with celebrations. Sacrifices were made in his honor. Animals were slaughtered by the thousands just to mark the occasion. Rome had never been more optimistic about a new emperor. That optimism lasted approximately 7 months. What followed was 4 years of behavior so erratic, so violent, and so completely unhinged that historians have spent 2,000 years arguing about whether Caligula was simply evil or whether something went genuinely wrong with his mind. He had senators humiliated publicly for sport. He forced noblemen to run alongside his chariot for miles. He executed people for looking at him incorrectly. He reportedly made his horse a consul of Rome, which either means he had a spectacular sense of humor or had completely lost his mind. Historians are still debating which one. He declared himself a living god and demanded to be worshipped accordingly. Temples were built, priests were appointed. Anyone who failed to show sufficient enthusiasm for the new divine emperor quickly found themselves on a very short list. In 41 AD, members of his own Praetorian Guard decided they had seen enough. Caligula was assassinated in a corridor beneath the Palladian Games. He was 28 years old. Rome celebrated.
Number 6. Ivan the Terrible, 1547. Ivan IV of Russia had a difficult childhood. His father died when he was 3. His mother was poisoned when he was 8. He was raised in the Moscow court, surrounded by powerful noble families, the Boyars, who largely ignored him, humiliated him, and used him as a political prop while they ran the country themselves. This is relevant context. It does not excuse anything that follows. Ivan became Tsar of Russia at 16, and for the first decade of his reign was actually considered a capable and relatively fair ruler. He reformed the legal system, expanded Russian territory, and built St. Basil's Cathedral, which still stands today.
Then his wife Anastasia died in 1560, and Ivan concluded, with no real evidence, that she had been poisoned by the Boyars. What followed was the Oprichnina. Ivan created a secret police force dressed entirely in black, riding black horses, carrying severed dog heads on their saddles to symbolize their loyalty to the Tsar. They were given authority to investigate, arrest, torture, and execute anyone Ivan pointed at. Entire towns were massacred on his orders. The city of Novgorod was subjected to a 5-week reign of terror in which somewhere between 2,000 and 60,000 people were killed. Ivan personally attended many of the executions and reportedly enjoyed the process. In 1581, during an argument, he struck his own son and heir, Ivan Ivanovich, in the head with his scepter, killing him. He then spent days weeping over the body of the son he had just murdered. He died in 1584, mid-game of chess, which is honestly the most Russian way to go.
Number 5. Pol Pot, 1975. In April 1975, the Khmer Rouge marched into Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia, and within days had begun one of the most radical and deadly social experiments in human history. Pol Pot, the leader of the Khmer Rouge, had a vision. He wanted to reset Cambodia to what he called Year Zero. All cities would be emptied, all currency abolished, all schools, hospitals, and factories closed. The entire population of Cambodia would be relocated to the countryside to work as agricultural laborers, building a new agrarian utopia from scratch. Anyone who represented the old society was to be eliminated. This included teachers, doctors, lawyers, engineers, monks, and anyone who wore glasses, since glasses suggested you could read, and reading suggested you were an intellectual, and intellectuals were enemies of Year Zero.
Between 1975 and 1979, somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million people died. In a country of 8 million people, That is approximately 1 in 4 Cambodians. Pol Pot was never formally prosecuted for genocide. He died in 1998 under house arrest in his bed at the age of 72. He gave an interview to a journalist shortly before his death and stated that his conscience was clear. Number 4. Vlad the Impaler, 1448. Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, earned his nickname the old-fashioned way. His preferred method of execution was impalement. Specifically, he favored driving a wooden stake through a person vertically, positioning it carefully so that the victim would remain alive for as long as possible. He would then arrange the impaled bodies in geometric patterns outside his castle or along roads as a message to anyone approaching. The message was, turn around. Vlad impaled tens of thousands of people during his reign. When the Ottoman army advanced on his territory in 1462, they reportedly encountered a forest of approximately 20,000 impaled Ottoman prisoners outside the city of Tergovishte. The Ottoman commander, Mehmed II, a man who had conquered Constantinople and was not easily rattled, turned his army around and went home. Vlad had a genuine and deeply unsettling enthusiasm for his work. He reportedly dined among the impaled bodies. He allegedly dipped his bread in the blood of his victims. He used impalement on men, women, children, and foreign ambassadors who failed to remove their hats in his presence. On that last point, if someone needs to impale you to get you to take your hat off, that is a communication breakdown on both sides. Number 3. Joseph Stalin, 1924. Joseph Stalin ruled the Soviet Union from 1924 until his death in 1953. In that time, scholars estimate that between 6 and 20 million people died as a direct result of his policies, purges, and engineered famines. The range is that wide because Stalin's record-keeping was, for obvious reasons, not great. Stalin's Great Purge of the late 1930s targeted anyone he perceived as a political threat, which turned out to be an enormous number of people. Military commanders, Communist Party officials, intellectuals, artists, factory workers, and ordinary citizens were arrested, tortured into confessions, and either executed or sent to the Gulag labor camps in Siberia. The Gulag system at its peak held approximately 1.8 million prisoners at any given time. Conditions were designed to break people, and they succeeded. Stalin also engineered the Holodomor, a deliberate famine in Ukraine between 1932 and 1933, in which somewhere between 3.5 and 7.5 million Ukrainians starved to death, while Soviet officials confiscated their grain. When Stalin finally died in 1953, his inner circle stood around his deathbed and watched. Nobody called a doctor for several hours. Historians have speculated that this was not an accident. Number 2. Mao Zedong, 1949. By raw numbers, Mao Zedong is the deadliest ruler in human history. Mao led the Chinese Communist Party to victory in 1949 and ruled China until his death in 1976. During that time, scholars estimate that his policies caused somewhere between 40 and 80 million deaths, making him responsible for more deaths than any other individual in recorded history. The Great Leap Forward, launched in 1958, was an attempt to rapidly industrialize China by collectivizing agriculture and melting down anything metal, including farming tools, to produce steel. The result was one of the worst famines in human history. Between 15 and 55 million people starved to death in 4 years. The Cultural Revolution, launched in 1966, targeted intellectuals, teachers, and anyone associated with traditional Chinese culture. Young people, organized into Red Guard units, roamed the country destroying historical artifacts, burning books, and persecuting anyone deemed insufficiently revolutionary. Mao was presented with estimates of the death toll during the Great Leap Forward and reportedly responded that throughout history, great achievements had always required great sacrifice. He died in 1976 at the age of 82. His embalmed body is still on public display in Beijing today. The line to see him is apparently very long. Number 1. Adolf Hitler, 1933.
There is no comedic angle here. Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1933, and within years had transformed a democratic republic into a totalitarian state. What followed was the systematic murder of 6 million Jewish people, along with millions of Roma, disabled people, political prisoners, Soviet civilians, and others, in what became known as the Holocaust. The Holocaust was not a chaotic byproduct of war. It was a planned, bureaucratically organized, industrially executed genocide. Entire government ministries were dedicated to its logistics. Railway schedules were optimized. Facilities were engineered specifically for mass murder. Records were kept meticulously. World War II, which Hitler initiated, resulted in somewhere between 70 and 85 million deaths total, representing approximately 3% of the entire world population at the time. Hitler died by suicide in a Berlin bunker on April 30th, 1945, as Soviet forces closed in around him. The ruins of Berlin were still burning when the rest of the world began the process of trying to understand how an entire nation had followed one man to the complete destruction of everything around them. That question still does not have a satisfying answer, and it probably never will.